Getting out of an abusive relationship early makes a huge difference.
And I'm proud to say I did come in as a victim, but I am a survivor.
Then I could see my mom. My mom was walking toward us. And I got excited. And I was like, there's my mom. And then he didn't stop.
I'm trying to keep it together, I said. I gave in to the tears. And I hated that.
It's not necessarily the easiest process. It's not necessarily the prettiest process, but it is the most effective process. Like, you can do this. I'm going to tell you 100% you can do this, and you're so worth it to do this.
I'm sure losing any child is a real arrow through your heart, but you know, she was great. She was a friend and a family member and our daughter.
It feels just as good the 10th time as it did the first time, to have one of your citizens that you're out there protecting walk up and tell you thank you.
There is one thing stronger in me than fear, and that's my determination. Welcome back. This is Jen Lee, the creator and host of I Need Blue, Survivors Talk Surviving. Visit www.ineedblue.net for additional stories. As you listen, if the message moves you, share it with friends and family. The more we share, the more we learn, and the more we can help. Please note, I Need Blue does contain stories which feature graphic content and could be triggering. Please seek help if needed. Remember, you always come first. Debra Mayer is a wife and mom. She tragically lost her only son, Shaun, to the disease of addiction. In honor of him, she spends her time creating awareness about the addiction epidemic while truly focusing on helping others like her son and their families. She is here to share her memories of Shaun, share his struggles which led to his opioid and eventual heroin addiction, which ultimately took his life. Debra is an advocate, a strong and powerful voice who has shared her testimony in front of legislators to create change. Debra, like many families, couldn't fathom ever having to deal with this. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It could be happening in your own home and you're not aware. It could be happening to a family next door. Here is an alarming statistic. During 2020, over 100,000 people in the U.S. died from an overdose. Synthetic opioids, including fentanyl, are now the most common drugs involved in overdose deaths. I would like to welcome my special guest, Debra Mayer. Thank you for being here today and allowing me to share your story.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Would you tell us about your son?
Yes, my son, Shaun, grew up in Merritt Island, and he has two sisters. He grew up in just a normal household, father and mom, and he loved baseball. He was a good kid. He was never in trouble. He was a happy boy. He was a little bit of a jokester, very smart, gifted. He loved animals very, very much. He was just this kind kid. You know, he played baseball, and my husband, was the coach. And of course, I was the cheerleader on the side, cheering him on. Then he got into music, and he played the guitar, and he actually was in a band. And so he was kind of well-rounded with music and sports and a family. That my husband worked at the Space Center as a manager out there on the shuttle program. And I was a stay-at-home mom. I did odd jobs here and there, while the kids were at school, just to have a little extra money for Christmas time. So he pretty much grew up in a pretty normal home, and I was very involved in the school, and no trauma, nothing really crazy happened in his life. He went off to college, and he earned a Bright Future Scholarship in engineering. And that's when things started to get bad in college. He was taking opioids, and when the opioids weren't available, it took years with just opioid pills, and we tried to get him help. And when that didn't work, the heroin came in. and our nightmare really began. And during this time, we are going through a crisis in our home as well. Before we even knew Shaun was addicted to these opioids, my husband had lymphoma, stage 3, and our daughter, who was 13 at the time, ended up with a very rare blood disease called HLH. She had a slim chance of survival. She's over at Arnold Palmer's, not too much known about this disease, putting her on chemo and heavy doses of steroids. So both her and my husband went through chemo together at the same time. Shaun was home taking care of the dogs. When we got home, we learned about his addiction and tried to get him help. It was pretty much a roller coaster ride after that. My daughter, of course, and my husband both survived, both got through this very, very hard time.
I'm just taking all of this in. So your husband is diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. Your teenage daughter is diagnosed with a rare disease. They have chemo at the same time. Your son, unbeknownst to you, is going through an addiction issue. How did you, let's talk about you for a second. How did you manage that?
I don't know. I don't think you realize how strong you are until it's the only option you have is to be strong. Rachel's disease, she had a 15%, less than 15% chance of survival. And there was only 100 cases worldwide per year of this rare disease. And there was a protocol. And it was very, very rough just seeing that, me going through that. We almost forgot my husband had lymphoma, because when your child is sick like that, that's what you concentrate on. And he would go to home to have his chemo treatments here and go back to Arnold Palmer. We were staying in Ronald McDonald House. And for those couple days, he wouldn't spend the night at the hospital. I would. And because he wasn't feeling well from the chemo. So it was a nightmare. But we got through it, and they both survived. And my daughter graduated UCF, and she's 25, and she's out there in Kansas City right now. But it was a rough time. We lived at Arnold Palmer Hospital for a month and a half while Rachel was going through these. So we didn't come home, other than my husband came home to have his chemo treatment. We stayed there with him. And Shaun was here taking care of the dogs.
So you essentially were gone like a month and a half.
Yes. So I could be with her. Yeah, I would never leave anybody in the hospital alone. Don't ever do that if you can, especially a child. But it was a rough time, because when we came home, I was actually missing jewelry. And that's how I found out it was my son. And he cried, and he was sorry, and he told me what was going on. And we immediately cried with him and got him help. It was devastating, but we were going to get him help, right? We're going to get you help. We're going to get the help you need. And he did. We got him into a rehab over there in Orlando. It was a month-long rehab, but he needed longer than that. And he didn't want to do longer than that. He thought, okay, I'm okay. Well, he wasn't okay. And he got back into it.
Did he ever say where he got the drugs when he was still living at home with you?
He started with the opioid pills, okay? And he ended up getting them, and you're not going to believe this. He ended up getting them from a guy he knew that worked for FedEx.
Wow.
That actually knew on the FedEx truck what was in the boxes that were being sent to the pharmacies. And he stole them. How long he got away with it, I don't know, but that was what Shaun told me. Now, remember, this was way back when he started. This was way back before Florida started cracking down on the opioid pills. It's right at that time that it got really, really bad. I think it was like around 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. And then they made it harder to get the opioid pills. You couldn't get them from a doctor as easy anymore. Yeah. I mean, and then and a lot of the doctors stopped, and they didn't know where to go. So they went and they got heroin. And heroin, I was shocked that heroin was even in our community. Like, you never heard about heroin. I mean, when I grew up, that was something that was, not even existed. And there was a lot of really dark times that we went through with that. It was devastating to see the person that you love, your child, not be the same person anymore. He was such a kind kid and everyone loved him. And he just turned into this irritable person that, I was scared to be around him at times. And this was later on in his addiction. So he was home, but then he left, he moved out, and it just got worse. I don't know how much of the nightmare do you want me to say, because there's so much involved in all the nightmare of getting phone calls in the middle of the night, not knowing if you were going to get that phone call. And that lasted many, many years. My son's addiction was probably almost 10 years before we lost him.
That moment that Shaun said to you, I have an addiction, I'm sure you will never forget. And there are many parents that experience that. For someone like me who has not, can you describe that moment?
The time he told me, I cried. He cried. We both cried. We all cried. We even had an intervention at one time with his sisters and all of us. We cried. We tried as a family to try to understand it. Like, how did it get this bad? How did it get this bad? How did it even get there? At the time when he told me, I cried, but I thought, oh, we're getting them help. Everything's going to be fine. Oh yeah, we'll just go get them help. And it doesn't always work out that way. And a lot of times it doesn't work out that way because it depends on, I believe, after reading so much, it depends on the person and how diseased their brain gets from the addiction that they have and whether they're going to be able to fight this or not. And I don't think we have very little options out there getting someone help. As he was into this, and we had many conversations with him, and he got back into the pills. This is before the actual heroin set in. He says, Mom, it's not your fault. So I said, what? Did something happen to you that, in your childhood, or something happened to you, as you were growing up that we don't know about? What did we do? Did we do anything? And he said, no, I had anxiety. And I go, why didn't you tell us you had anxiety? I didn't see anxiety in my son. He didn't appear to have anxiety. He was a happy kid and, he had friends. And he says, I had anxiety, but I didn't know what it was. So he did self-medicate in high school at one time, not with opioids, but with Adderall. And that was like the last 6 months of his senior year. He was self-medicating for a mental illness that we didn't even know about. So when they're, in high school and, hey, try this, oh, wow, I feel so good. I feel so much better. Or they try to fit in or whatever. And some of them don't get addicted. Some of them can walk away, just like any of us back in our days. And we did some things, right? We walked away. We were fine. It was fine. It never affected our lives. But there's some it does. But he couldn't get away from it. He said he couldn't live without it. It got so bad, we sent him out to Washington State. I had gotten divorced. Shaun was from my first marriage. And we sent him out to his dad's. And he actually got a very good job out there. Shaun's a very bright kid and very, very smart. And he got out there, and Washington State, I had no idea how bad Washington State was. But he got into the heroin. It was bad out there. We flew out there 4 or 5 times. Probably 3 of those times he was in the hospital. He had sepsis. He had had endocarditis of the heart. See, when you do heroin or fentanyl or any of that, it's not just you die of an overdose. You can, like my son, but it takes havoc on your body. You could die of a heart problem, a kidney problem. Coroner's report, he had endocarditis, hepatitis C, uh, kidney disease, and he was a very sick man at 33. He could have died of any of those things, but that's what these drugs do to you. And we went out there, tried to save him many, many times. We just couldn't. There's not enough availability. I don't think too many people know what to do with the heroin addiction at that time. They still don't know what.
What was it like as a parent having your child be so far away, knowing that he's dealing with this addiction, and your son's over in Washington State? So that's question number one. And what was your first visit like to Washington State?
When we sent him out there, because we thought, okay, we'll get him away from the area. Don't ever think that as a parent. Getting your loved one away from an area that you think is maybe bad influence on them is not the answer. I learned that because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And of course, Washington State, it's really out there a lot with all the homeless, and it's a mess out there. So how did I feel? You know what? At first, I have to admit, Jen, I felt relieved because I lived a nightmare when he was here. Never, going and picking him up in the middle of the night. It was a roller coaster ride here. It was, just seeing it face on, seeing him face on, seeing the addiction face on, seeing the ugliness that it entails. I was watching it, and I was almost relieved that he left. That doesn't mean I didn't love my son. It's exhausting. And I thought, okay, he's out there, and my ex-husband now has to deal with it, and hopefully that's what my son needs, is to get away. So it was almost a relief, like a hope, like a glimmer of hope. And I needed to, I needed to have a breath. I hadn't had a breath in a while. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't had a night's sleep. That rapidly changed, of course, when he ended up getting back into it. We kept getting calls from my ex-husband that he, really had to kick him out. And so we went out there, and the first visit was really, really hard because here, this son of ours who loved baseball, loved his stepdad, loved his sisters, his little sister, especially you teach how to play guitar, went off to college on a scholarship in engineering, great kid, was sitting on a step in a very bad area of Washington State. The cops told us, don't go down there. It's dangerous. And we drove by, and he spotted us. He didn't know we were coming. He had no idea we were coming. I couldn't get a hold of him. See, when you're an addict and you're living on the streets almost, you share a cell phone. A lot of times then that cell phone gets stolen, and you don't have a phone until the next person gets a phone, and then you share it. He ended up meeting us, and we ended up taking him out to a really nice dinner. And it was hard because I knew when we walked into that nice restaurant, and I wanted to give my son I wanted to give him a nice meal, and he probably hadn't had one in I don't know how long. But when he walked in there, I knew the stares, you could tell that he wasn't well, that he was probably on drugs at the time. He was very thin and very hollow looking, and he couldn't even hardly eat. And then I didn't want to take him back to where I kept him at. I begged him to come back with us. And he said, no, Mom. And I said, please. He says, don't ever come back there again. It's dangerous. And I just wanted to kidnap him. Honestly, we wanted to kidnap him. Just from there, get him in the car, lock the car, hog tie him, whatever we had to do, and put him on a plane back home. And you can't do that. And it was really hard.
Yeah. I can't imagine as a mom, like you said, wanting to kidnap my child and bring them home, and then having them say, no, I don't want to. Right. I can't imagine that pain, but my heart goes out to you. How old was he at this time?
26, 27. When they're using heroin, there's also fentanyl in the heroin. At this time, fentanyl wasn't a real big issue. They are using needles And sometimes they're using dirty needles because that's all they can find. This is how bad it gets. From a kid in college to this, that he had developed very, very bad sores on his leg. The reality is when they shoot up, they have to go to different veins because their veins eventually collapse. When they go to their legs, they go to their groin, wherever. This is how desperate they are. And my son had developed sepsis, and he was very sick. And I went there, and my husband and I went out there and told the doctors that he is a heroin addict and he cannot have anything for pain. They've been giving him morphine. And he left the hospital sooner than he was supposed to because he needed his fix. We went back home because, of course, he didn't want to come to us. And, that was a repeat thing several times when we went out there. One time his baby sister came out there. That was the last time. And he yelled that he didn't want, why did you let anybody up here? Why'd you come? I don't want you to see me. So he knew to see him like that. But he couldn't get out of the grips of it. And that is hard. That is hard. You think, people have a big stigma about it. And I think they have a big stigma about the family. Oh, that is my kid. They don't live it. They're not in it. They don't understand. You can love them so much and you can do everything for them. But when that addiction gets the grips of them, no amount of love is going to save your kid. You understand that?
I do. And that's hard because we think if nothing else, we can love you. Love is supposed to prevail, right?
And they do blame parents, a lot of people out there, Oh, they weren't a good parent, they didn't do the right things, they must have done something to their kid, they must have, all sorts of scenarios. And that's so far from the truth, Jen. I have met so many wonderful, wonderful parents and moms that suffer. They weren't bad parents. It's just one of those horrible things that happen. And it's happening it's happening more than ever now. 100,000 people overdosed last year. 100,000.
I wonder how many people know that. There's a spotlight on something else right now that caused death, and it overshadowed what is actually happening. Yes, and that's why I was so happy, number one, to have met you, and number two, to want to share your story, because this is an epidemic to a degree that people don't realize. They want to think it won't happen to them. It's not in the schools. It's not in their community. It's not next door. It's not in their son or daughter's pocket right now. But the reality is that it is, and our children, like you said, are dying. That's a reality. Did you have a moment where you wanted to give up?
I have to admit that Shaun got really, 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 really bad towards the end. My hope was diminishing and I saw him suffering. There was times that I felt if God would take him, he would be out of his suffering. But I still had that glimmer of hope, enough to say, no, there's still hope. There's still hope. But when you see your child like that, I mean, what I saw of Shaun, it was not my son. That wasn't my son. He actually pushed us away in the end and, said a couple mean things because, I think Shaun was trying to save us from not seeing what it was doing to him because he knew it would hurt us so bad. And he wanted us not to ever see him like that. And he pushed his family away. And one thing I never did was I never put him down. I never called him names. I never told him he was terrible. I just kept trying to find those magic words that I'm going to say to him and it's going to click. I knew a little bit about what he was going through, because when your kid is sick or your kid is, whatever it is your child's going through, what does a mom do? She's better than the FBI. I researched constantly. I talked to people who were addicts and recovered. And I like to use recovery. I don't like to use the word clean. I think we need to change some of our language on addiction. Clean means you were dirty. So I always like to say recovery. You're in recovery. From talking to others, and I knew from my research he was suffering. And I never took anything personal, because there's some ugly moments that he said things. And that's what drugs do to you. And of course that was his way of also pushing us away. And I just said, that's the drugs. You just do so much research, Jen, that I think I was a doctor in it. Like, I knew so much, just like when my daughter was in the hospital suffering, I knew more than the doctor. Sometimes I would say, yes, I read up and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, you know everything, because as a mom, that's what we do. Right.
Right. Well, they say knowledge is power. And I think in your situation in particular, trying to understand everything. How did we get here? How do I help? Anytime you could read something, it probably gave you that little bit of hope, because maybe it was a new idea. Maybe it was a new approach, a new way of looking at it. And you were like, okay, I never thought of that. Let me try that. And maybe that helped to maintain that hope that stayed in you.
And I would tell Shaun of these things. I'd say, I would text him, and sometimes I would never get a text back, but I kept texting him, and I kept sending him information, article he's going to read. And, and there was a medication that you could take, but it was very, very expensive. They would stay on for a little while, and just so they wouldn't have the cravings after a while. It worked for some, it didn't. Just get him on Suboxone when he was here. That didn't work. Suboxone is kind of like heroin. It's still medicating you, and he ended up selling it for what he wanted. Therapy didn't work. It's very hard for some people, and I know there's some people that have suffered addiction. And one day I woke up and I said, enough's enough, and you have to want it, and that's great. You should tell your story, and that's great. And you're right. Some can, but the ones that don't compare what you could do to the ones that couldn't, because just like lung disease, smoking, your lungs weren't as diseased as somebody else's. Nobody wants to do this, Jen. No, nobody wants to live that life and live on the streets. And the things my son saw, I think the trauma that he saw on the streets made it even harder for him, because he was such a kind soul. And I want to tell you this, that when my son overdosed, I was on Facebook, okay? People in Washington State that were his friends, that were also addicts, that also suffered addiction, reached out to me and told me what a wonderful person he was, even through his dark days. The girls would say that Shaun on the streets would make sure that they wouldn't get hurt and would protect them. He was still deep down. There was still the upbringing that we brought him up with. And we met one of the girls that he actually went out with. It was his girlfriend for a little while. I was out there, and she met us. She told us what a wonderful person he was and all the good things that he did for some people out there. Shaun was getting very depressed. And then, of course, then he overdosed. And he said he was a brother to him, and he helped his mother, with her house and fixing things. Shaun, that was still there somewhere. Well, my son, when he overdosed and we got the call, we all were preparing ourselves for this, but really you're not prepared. I was watching my 2 grandkids while my daughter and her husband went away for his birthday for the weekend. And I got the call. It said Washington, and I was so excited, Shaun. Sean's calling. And it wasn't. I fell apart. And luckily my daughter was home from college and she took the two girls. One was a baby and one was like 4 years old, 5 years old. And she called my husband and he came home and he found me in the closet, just bawling my head off. It was a nightmare that came true that I prayed wouldn't, and it came true. I lost my son, my child, my only son, and it was devastating. And we tried so hard to save him. Many, many trips out there to try to save him. And it's the worst nightmare a parent can go. And what's sad is it's happening to too many of us. This shouldn't be happening. I will grieve the rest of my life until I take my last breath. But in order to live for him, so his life wasn't in vain, his journey that he went on was not in vain. I've started a group called Mom and On in Brevard County. It's for moms in Brevard County, and on Facebook, and we do meet. And it's a group of moms that either their children are in active addiction and they don't know what to do because you go through such a roller coaster ride with that, and not knowing when that day you'll get that call, to moms that have lost their children. And I also, I'm on the board with Space Coast Recovery. We have a wonderful nonprofit recovery center in our area, and they've been very successful with their program over there.
It's a great time to preface that Space Coast Recovery, they will be a part of my next episode. Very excited about that. And it will include Robbie, who is in recovery and doing fabulous, and a therapist over there. So, yes. So thank you, Debra. You were the one that kind of helped to make that connection.
Yes. And, many who recover end up using their experience and their recovery and all that to help others. I mean, they're the best ones to be because they understand what that person's going through more than anybody. We couldn't understand, but they do. They've lived it. I do want to mention that when I got when we heard about Shaun, I think it was a year before that, I had written to Lauren Davis. She's a state legislator out there, in Washington State. And she had started what's called the Ricky's Law out there, because no matter what I did, I could not mandate my son into rehab. Even when he had been in jail, for stealing something out of a store over there, I wrote the judge. We all did. My whole family, please, mandate him to spend time in rehab, because he's not going to get the help in jail. And he wasn't in very long. 30 days was it. And they let him out. And, you know why they let him out? They let him out because he had hepatitis C, and they cannot have people that are sick in jail like that. That's why they let my son out. In the state of Washington. They don't do that here in Florida. The state of Washington. And they're very liberal on their, with crime and stuff. They let you out. And I begged and wrote them. And so anyway, I wrote to her, and she said the Ricky's Law was not in effect. And what the Ricky's Law says is you can, as a family or as a parent or loved one, you can mandate 30 days of rehab where they will actually come pick your loved one up in an ambulance, and they have no choice. They're stripped of their rights. Like, they can't deny not going. And there's criteria that they have to meet, how sick they are. And Shaun met all of it. And they would go to a rehab for 30 days. And after that, they would be given the opportunity to continue on. And she says the law has not come into effect yet. Well, it did come into effect eventually, and it failed Shaun because the area Shaun was in, King County, did not have enough funding for the ambulance service. So they So that was the county that my son was in. So when I begged them to please pick him up, and they wouldn't, because they were not participating in this new law Ricky's law in Washington State because of funding. So they failed him. So Lauren Davis posted something on Facebook, and I told her what happened to Shaun. She posted my letter that I wrote her. And I reached out to her, and she asked me to come out and tell Shaun's story to the state legislators. They are trying to get more money put into the program so that could be fixed, and King County would have the funding for the ambulance service. Because you couldn't just go pick your child up or your loved one up and send them to this rehab. They had to be picked up by ambulance. That was the criteria. And so I went out there and spoke to the state legislators, and it was unanimously passed based on his story, and the governor signed it, and $55 million was put into Ricky's law in honor of Shaun. I would love a law like that here in Florida. And, Shaun's only been gone 3 years, and one day when I have the strength, that will be my next thing to pursue. Grief takes a lot out of you. So it's coming, and I would love to get a law similar, and maybe even make it Shaun's law here in Florida.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Yep. I think that's great. And it goes to show that, it takes one person to get that ball rolling, and what a difference it has made. How did you help your daughter through this? I would say because it affects a family. So
This one that went through she got 2 daughters. I have an older one that's married with 2 children. Affected her a lot. It's affected her a lot. Yeah, she's got anxiety and depression that she deals with herself, because she went through trauma when she was in the hospital. Here you are, a 13-year-old girl, and she had long blonde, beautiful hair, and she was, happy and, doing friend things, and beach, and, all that stuff. And she wakes up one day and she's in the hospital, and she's lost all her hair, and she's very sick. And then when she started school, she started her first year of high school in a wig. People picked on her. She got some bullying, and I made fun of, pulled her wig. It was, that in itself was trauma to her. And then to have her brother pass away. Yes, she even texted me the other night and said, "Are you up? I'm having a hard time. I'm thinking about my brother." So, it affects her. And my other daughter, I know it affects too. So, yes, it has affected all of us. And it still affects me, but I try to do good for people like my son, and mothers that are suffering, because I had nothing when nobody understood, even in my family, what I was going through, losing a child. I think a mother takes the hit the most, but I know fathers do too. I'm finally out of the fog of losing my child, and I'm saying there's a fog. There's a fog for the first several years, but I have a lot of work to do.
you shared something amazing with me, and it has to do with backpacks that you carry around in your car. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I started out with purses for a cause, and I would fill purses up, and but that was just for the women. And what I would do is I would put, feminine products and toothbrush and toothpaste and washcloth, all these stuff in this bag, and I would put information on where to get help, and then a little note telling them And so then I said, well, you know what? I want to reach out to ones like my son. I want to reach out to the guys too. So I started backpacks. So I only do backpacks now, and I do the pretty color backpacks for the girls and the boy backpacks for the boys. And what happened on the night before Christmas Eve, we went to spend the evening at my sister-in-law's house. On the way back, there was 3 guys on the side of the road by the church here in Merritt Island, by Baptist Church. And I pulled in. My husband and I drove separate cars because I had to come from work. And he knew exactly what I was going to do. And I pulled in, and they're all standing out there, and they were all homeless, and they were all drug addicts. And I told them about my son, and we talked for half an hour, my husband and I, to them. And in their backpack, and they really wanted to get help, Jen. We want to get help. We want to get help. I need a sponsor. They really, and I think they felt good because I treated them like a normal person. I wasn't, I didn't call them names, or I sat there and I told my son's story. I let them know I understood. See, I think that stops people from getting help, the stigma, the embarrassment. I said, I know you're not alone. And I go, in that backpack are ways to get help and who to call and where to go. And I told them about Space Coast Recovery as well. So I don't know if any of those guys went to Space Coast Recovery or called any of those numbers. But if just one person out of all the backpacks that I pass out throughout the year, one person gets help, that's great.
Are you in need of backpacks and the items you put inside?
Well, I have a couple still left, but I'm always, it's great because I get donations too. Like a lot of my moms too. Like I have a lot of the moms will donate. I had this one mom donate gift cards for McDonald's, so they could just go to McDonald's and have something to eat. Every now and then when I need backpacks or something, and they all come through. But I found these backpacks on Amazon now that aren't very expensive, and they're all, and I got plenty right now of those, and I got plenty donations that I'm still filling more backpacks up. But when the time comes, yes, I would love. I mean, I take socks and snacks and toothbrush and toothpaste and shampoos, and that's what I put in the backpacks.
That's great. And so what I will do is in the show notes for your episode is I will put either your Facebook where they can contact you or whoever if they want to contribute to your cause.
Oh, okay. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And if anybody wants one of these backpacks or wants to keep some of them in their car, they can. And then if you see somebody, on the side of the road or whatever, you have something to give them. And what I like is in there is way to get help. It's really, how do they know?
Right. That's so important. So you have given back. You've given back in so many different ways then through influencing the law change in Washington state, the backpacks, just the information you are sharing today.
Mom and On. I do Mom and On, and I'm on the board at the Space Coast Recovery.
Mom and On, I also will put that information in the show notes. Space Coast Recovery, I will put that. Actually, they will be located on my Get Help tab.
For moms, they do fentanyl awareness and fight against fentanyl. Their son actually was in Ohio at the time, and he was serving time because when there's drugs, there is, crime, and it's never crime of, usually never crime of like violence. It's usually stealing because they need to steal in order to get the money, in order to get their drugs. And he was in jail in Ohio, and he actually had an overdose in the jail of fentanyl that was brought in, and he died. They have these fentanyl awareness and fight against fentanyl. Debbie and Brent Gibney, Gibney, and they have these Facebook awareness pages.
Great. What is the greatest misconception when it comes to individuals who are dealing with addiction?
That they're bad people. Because they're not. They're sick people that need help. They have a disease like any other disease, but we don't understand that disease because it affects society and it affects families in a horrific way that's ugly. Whereas another disease would, you're sick, you go to the hospital, you get well, or you get treatments or whatever. It's just so misunderstood. And I'm going to let you know that I have met many, many people that are suffering addiction, whether they be, on the streets, and I've talked to them, whether it be the ones that space coast recovery that I've seen. And I will tell you that every one of them that I have met has been gracious, kind, and I think people who self-medicate like that, or even start to self-medicate, I think sometimes the world is too cruel for them. They have big hearts and they cannot handle life. Life is too cruel for them. Does that make sense? And they self-medicate. And a lot of that has to do a lot of times, in fact, probably most of the time, it's an underlying mental illness, whether it be depression, anxiety, different mental illnesses out there. They don't feel right in their own skin.
Thank you for sharing that. Debra, I'd like to give you the opportunity for some final thoughts.
Final thoughts? I would like people to understand what addiction is and how it affects people and how their judgment and their stigma against it isn't helping people get help. And nor is it helpful to assume parents or families that have children that suffer addiction, there must be something wrong with the family, because that's so far from the truth. And I want people to start writing their government, their state legislators. This has to stop. On the border, bringing all that in. This has to stop. Really young kids are starting to die from this stuff, and this is something we need to do something about immediately. And a lot of it's coming in through the borders. And I'm real against this borders being open right now, because I see more and more moms coming to me that join my group, and their kid has died not just of heroin. They died of fentanyl, because fentanyl it will kill you just like that.
Today, Border Patrol confiscated street value amount of drugs at $1.7 million.
Wow. And fentanyl, it just takes a speck to kill a person.
No. I think something else that's really important too, especially for our community, is to be aware. I know our Sheriff Ivy here is very big into if you see something, say something. And that is so important. So if you see something going on that doesn't look right, or maybe, you even witness a brazen drug dealing or drug deal or whatever, you need to call the authorities so that we can get that handled. Based upon something we were just talking about, do you think in order to fulfill your son's habit that he was also selling?
Yeah. And I will, probably, because there comes a time, they can't have a job. Think about it. They can't hold a job down, and they need their fix. And I also want to mention, Jen, that I talk to my kids about drugs a lot. In fact, in elementary school, I used to just say no to drugs, Mom. So it wasn't like I didn't talk to my kids about drugs, didn't warn them about drugs. I did all those things as a parent. And I would never have imagined my son. In many years.
That's a perfect way to end it, with your words just like that. I want to thank Debra for being my special guest today. All of your information was inspiring, helpful. I am sorry for the loss of your son, Shaun, but what you are doing to bring awareness and help others, especially with your backpack program, I think is amazing. Again, if you want to contribute and help out, the information will be in the show notes for this episode. This is Jen Lee, creator and host of I Need Blue. I can be found at www.ineedblue.net. And remember, you are stronger than you think.